Hello, students, and welcome back to the final lecture of this unit. Um, this new unit, the new micro. I know that this unit it's a little bit of a tough unit because the four topics that we've been talking about over the past few weeks, they're sort of from different parts, all different parts of economics, right? Game theory, present value, all of these things. So I understand that it's a lot of information and probably about things that you haven't been exposed to in a previous class. Um, and so, in terms of how to approach that, I would say, number one, just try to get the general gist of each of these concepts and try to get some intuitive sense of what they're about. Okay. Um, do you need to, really pick up on every single detail, of every single one of these concepts? I would argue that that's not so important. It's less important than sort of getting the big idea. Okay. However, there is one detail that I do want you to master. Okay. And that's how to use those Google Sheets. Okay. The ones to compute the expected value and the present value. And there's two reasons for that. One is knowing how to use a spreadsheet is just an essential computer skill. Okay. You guys going into the workforce, you guys all have to be tech savvy. You guys all have to be computer literate. I mean, this whole thing with the online classes and the coronavirus, that's just proof of that. Okay. So it's just something you need to know how to do anyways. But moreover, in the next unit we're heading into, which is applied microeconomics, our final unit, applied microeconomics, that's all about the analysis of microeconomic data. And so a lot of that actually we're going to be we're going to be using Google Sheets to do a lot of that stuff too. Okay, so I want you guys to familiarize yourself with using the spreadsheet, and so it's really important that you can do that. If you guys have any questions about how to do that or about any of the other material that we've been covering so far, come see me in office hours, okay, online office hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay, so then with that, then let's get into the main topic. Behavioral economics, this lecture, a lot of students like this lecture, okay? And I kind of like it too. This subject is a lot of fun. And, it's sort of a breath of fresh air compared to some of the more, mathematical or theoretical topics that we've been covering for most of this class. So let me give you guys a bit of history. So behavioral economics as a field, okay, really started in the 1980s and 90s. And, the genesis of this really was the rationality assumption, okay? At the beginning of the class, I talked about how economists usually assume that people act rationally. And I justified this assumption by saying that, rational behavior is more predictable, okay? So if I'm playing chess against somebody and I know that they're rational, I don't have to consider every single move they could possibly make. I just need to consider some of the better moves, okay? And so that predictability is really important for microeconomists when they're building some sort of model, usually a mathematical model, of how people or how firms behave. Now, a student replied to me, well, okay, that's fair. I agree that rational behavior is more predictable, but what's the point of a model being more predictable when it's not going to make the correct predictions in the first place, right? We all know that a lot of human behavior is irrational, right? So what's the point? Okay, yeah, you can build some model where people don't behave that way, and it will be, easier to create that model. But then what's the point if that model isn't very realistic in the first place? Well, I told this student, I get you, and a lot of economists back then were also thinking the same thing. And, these economists in the 1980s and 90s, they wanted to incorporate more realistic psychological effects into economic theory. And the branch of economics that they created is now called behavioral economics. And this is a field of economics that really is very different from the rest of microeconomics. They're sort of the odd one out in the family. And they're using methodology that would be much more similar to something you would see in psychology necessarily than what an economist would typically do. And uh, so now it's a very broad field. Okay, there's been a lot of research into behavioral economics. And it would be hard to sort of, capture all of that in a single lecture, but I'm going to try. I'm going to really try to give you guys what I view as the three key insights from behavioral economics. Um, and they are the following. The number one is something called framing, okay? And that is the idea that how a decision is presented matters in terms of what a person is going to decide. Okay. The second is reference dependence. And this is it's related to framing in a way. And it's this idea that every choice is relative to something else. And finally, and perhaps this is the most important one, there is something, it has a weird name, okay? There's something called the availability heuristic. And that basically captures the idea that our ability to choose is limited by our ability to imagine those choices. Okay, so we're going to talk in a lot more detail about each of these subjects in the subsequent videos.